Hi all. As we turn the page from 2020 to 2021, word is starting to pick up regarding the Tripowin TC-01. Tripowin is a company that most people associate with making cables at this point. The Tripowin C8 has been shilled by Zeos for well over a year now, and I frequently use balanced versions of both it and the Tripowin Zoni cable in my testing. So I do like their cables, but do their earphones measure up? Let's get into it. The build of the TC-01 is pretty nice. The shell is made out of metal, and it seems both lightweight and durable. The overall build is on the smaller size, but the size of the nozzle is neither too large nor too small. It fits mostly well within my ear overall, and I had no real difficulties with comfort. Connection is established in the TC-01 via flush 2-pin connectors, and if I had one criticism here, I would have preferred this to be a properly recessed 2-pin connection instead. This set comes with a pretty standard selection of silicone tips, but these were neither my favorite for fit, sound, nor comfort. I found the sonics lacking and the mid-bass specifically too intense with the stock tips, and I much preferred the E-Pro horn-shaped tips instead. So I'd recommend investing in a set of horn tips for this set. I think they are generally pretty cheap for ear tips, around $10 off Amazon. I'll place a link in the description below. The cable is plastic wrapped and twisted. It played well for the most part in normal use case scenarios, but I could also never get it to really lay perfectly flat either. Here, the quality of the cable seems like an afterthought. I gathered that they cared enough to provide a decent cable in the package, as its connectors are rather good, but this cable isn't a cable that I would use for the long term either. Overall, it just seems rather cheap, plasticky, and not well thought out. For instance, they missed the boat with regard to the chin slider, as it's just a piece of clear plastic, rather than a bead or made of something of higher quality like a piece of metal, wood, or other premium material. And I guess they want you to buy one of their aftermarket cables, because I really didn't find this cable to sound very good with this earphone either, as it clouded an already murky resolution with this set when in use. However, the case included with the TC-01 is quite nice, and I found that it's even nicer than the case that I have been using recently, which came with my K-Bear Lark. It's a hardshell case and on the smaller side, but still has enough room inside of it to host most earphones and their cables. It is covered in a black woven material and has a mesh net on the inside for extra goodies. There is also a provided wrist strap, which clasps on the outside via a metal mounting ring to aid in its carry. As an additional perk, the case is also unbranded, so I'll most likely be switching to this case for my daily carries, at least until something better comes along. Timbre on this earphone is rather warm, and it has a similar tonality to that of the blonde BL03. It also has a similar stage in terms of its width, but with additional depth and height to its presentation, which is a plus. There's also less stretching and smearing of the sonics here, and I found separation to be both pretty decent and better than the blonde BL03 as well. Instrument distinction was suitable, and its placement of instruments within space was accurate. Imaging was good for the price point, and sonics were less cluttered within its stage compared to some others in the marketplace around this price point. Transients and decay capabilities were also decently well executed, and there is a certain ambiance to the overall presentation that I do find endearing. There's a certain fullness to the presentation here, and I know that a lot of people are looking for that. It's also similar to the blonde BL03 in this way, without being as murky in its overall presentation, nor as confused by more complicated sonics. Besides its staging, vocals are a standout characteristic for this set. If you're a vocal first listener, then this could be an everyday knock-around carry IEM for you. Vocals are distinct from the rest of the presentation, and they are more forward in the mix. The TC-01 does well with both male and female vocals alike, pushing male vocals more forward than some other sets, especially in this price range, and rounding off female vocals appropriately so so that they are always soothing and pleasant and never sharp or shrill. Aside from its vocals, the mid-range is rather laid back, but there is enough presence here to satisfy most, especially if one is coming from more of a consumer tuning than an audiophile one. Unfortunately, as an audiophile, I found the mid-range to lack some definition at times, as it was often too soft in its delivery to the ear for me. The treble was also soft in its delivery, but well extended enough, and while I did not feel that things were overly rolled off to the point where I was missing information from the treble region, it was apparent to me that the aim of the TC-01 was a smooth and pleasant delivery of sound, even at the cost of detailing and resolution characteristics if necessary. So, detailing and resolution capabilities were not strengths of this set, but as I've already mentioned, switching to alternative cables did help improve the clarity a bit from what one gets from this set straight out of the box. So, onto the bass. The bass here is simply over-elevated, particularly in the mid-bass, and it doesn't do this earphone any favors as a result. The TC-01 can be classified as an IEM type that I'm going to start calling IEMs for petulant children from the Aloha state, which, in other words, is an earphone with some tricks to it that sounds much like an upgraded Sony, with much too much mid-bass and lacking in general resolution. On certain songs, the kick drum is all I hear, and it's distracting. On the song Jambi by Tool, the kick drum is just too far forward, and the mid-bass here bleeds into other sonics in an unpleasant fashion. On the track When the Levee Breaks by Led Zeppelin, it's subtle, and it takes a trained listener to parse it out, but the kick drum comes through as overly authoritative. One should note that this is a track where the drums were famously recorded in a stairwell by hanging microphones over a banister to pick up a thinner, ambient, ghost-like effect from the drums of John Bonham below. Plus, any true historian of Led Zeppelin knows that Bonham famously tuned his drumheads pretty high. A reviewer worth his salt with skills would know this and would not expect an exaggerated response from the kick drum or bass region in general from this track. And look, I'm all for a well-executed bass, even when it's elevated, but in this case, it's simply not the best, at least from a true audiophile standpoint. So, where does the Tripowin TC-01 fit in, and who is this IEM for? Well, I've said prior that if I was looking for an upgrade from the Blonde BL03, then I would look at the Shozy Forum 1.1 with JVC spiral dots at around $75 for the earphone and an additional $15 to $20 for the tips. And I still stand by that recommendation. However, I now think that the Tripowin TC-01 lays firmly in the middle of that upgrade path, as it lies somewhere in quality in between the Blonde BL03 and the Shozy Forum 1.1. I also think that the TC-01 will be for those audiophiles for whom vocals or a fuller presentation are the priority, even over mid-bass performance and clarity. And it is with this earphone's resolution limitations in mind that I do find the TC-01 to be somewhat overpriced at $50. I think I would be more forgiving if the TC-01 was priced at around $30 to $35 or even less instead, as at this price point it would compete more effectively with earphones like the K-Bear Lark. The Lark is a similarly built earphone in terms of quality, and it comes with a comparably rich package in its box as well. With that said, I would personally look at Moondrop's SSR, Jade Audio's EA1 or EA3, or 10 Hi-Fi's T2 Plus prior to considering the Tripowin TC-01, but to each their own. And with that, I'm out for now.